And you are on.
Hi, I'm Dr. Steve Hassan. Welcome to my live stream. It is now Wednesday, September 10th, 2025. Hope you had a good summer. This is our first live stream since Labor Day weekend is over. And there continues to be a fire hose of upsetting news that's happening around the world. And I've been thinking more and more about my lane, which is psychology, and the psychology in particular of how to be healthy and to resist authoritarian mind control, how to inoculate people, how to talk to people who are involved with authoritarian cult mind control groups, how to recover. And that's really the focus of what I want to do. I was going to talk about some news events that are very noteworthy, like the federal trafficking charges against Garcia, head of La Luz del Mundo, who's been in jail in California, but now there are federal charges against him, which I'm delighted. We had the good fortune of interviewing Xochitl Martin, former fourth generation trafficked member of that cult, who's been just doing a tremendous amount to educate people about mind control cults and helped translate my BITE model and influence continuum, my doctoral dissertation, into Spanish. And I'm proud to say we now have a published Spanish edition of Combating, and we've included Xochitl's story in it, along with former Hispanics, other cults, including Opus Dei, Legionaries of Christ, International Church of Christ. And because ICE is targeting Hispanics in particular, I think it's really very important for us to do more outreach to Spanish-speaking Americans. And so many, unfortunately, voted for Trump, thinking that they're not brown and he's not going to come after Hispanics, just criminal gangs. And because the Democratic messaging was so awful to them, so many voted for Trump. And now they're realizing, oh my goodness, what a liar Trump is. And he turns out to be a pedophile and a trafficker, according to all of the alleged victims who came to Washington to testify. And the Epstein file debacle is not going away. And I did want to do a shout out to Marjorie Taylor Greene. I never thought I would do this, but I saw her post a placard in the Capitol of the disgusting birthday wishes that Donald Trump put in the 50th birthday volume. That Trump is now denying he signed his name, but of course it's his name. And where he does his scribbly thing is the pubic hair of an outline of a woman's body, so it's even more suggestive of just the evil. And if you just remember back to the Access Hollywood hot mic, where he talked about how women just love it when you grab them by the genitals and they let you do anything. What a disgusting man. And I think a lot of people are just really can't believe that they believed that he was God's agent on earth. Although Trump, as he's having health issues, is talking more and more about heaven. So interesting. And Paula White Keene, his spiritual advisor and an NAR person, and I wrote about in The Cult of Trump, the New Apostolic Reformation, or NAR, she was recently quoted as saying, if you don't do what Donald Trump says, it's like saying no to God. And I retweeted it with a quote saying, when I was in the Moonies, that's what we believed, that if we didn't do what Sun Myung Moon told us, then we'd be saying no to God. Pretty creepy, huh? And last week I met a Jewish man who was talking about, he was hearing crazy stuff from his rabbi that there's talk that Netanyahu is the Moshiach or the Messiah. And we read today about Netanyahu bombing Qatar, going after Hamas in a third country, not Gaza, trying to kill people and killing people, maybe not the right people. So it's kind of disgusting, but on all of those notes, I want to talk about resiliency and the fact that there are so many Americans and people around the world who are saying no to authoritarianism. And I agree with Heather Cox Richardson. If you don't subscribe to her newsletter on Substack or listen to her talking about, events, I really recommend it. And as you're going to Substack, come to my Substack, because we're growing at a rapid clip and we're adding lots of content for our paid subscribers. And we're really asking people, hey, you may go out and buy a coffee for $7. Give us $5 a month and help us out. And if we can get enough people doing $5, we're going to be able to expand our reach dramatically, which is what I really hope to do. Why? Because we're living in a moment of psychological warfare. And people need to stop being in their lanes. Politicians are in the political lane, media people are in the media lane. And what's been missing is mental health experts. And if you haven't listened to this week's podcast with Dr. Bandy Lee, forensic psychiatrist, someone who's edited and written books on Donald Trump's pathology, come listen and read the blog and watch the interview with Bandy. The media should be highlighting people like herself and myself, and there were over 50 people who wrote in this last version how dangerous Donald Trump is. We should be tapping our experts who understand psychology and not just relying on social media pundits who know nothing about psychology, who are trying to tell people how to get people out of cults. Hello? There is an importance to going to accredited, credentialed, experienced folks, people who've been there, done that for years and years and years, and who endeavor to continue to teach. So, start locally, start with one person, and ask if they're registered to vote. Ask them, if what they think of Trump saying that, well, the latest I heard was last week was that Trump was an FBI informant. I think Mike Johnson even said that nonsense. And yet there are, hundreds, if not more, thousands of testimonials of people who saw Trump with Epstein and Maxwell with underage girls, and former KGB officials talking about, of course, Putin has videos of Trump with underage girls. Don't be silly. They did that regularly with all Western businessmen who came to the Soviet Union. They videotaped them and set them up with beautiful women and underage girls. What's it going to take for people to get to a tipping point and say, you know what? I don't like the GOP's policies. I don't like what they're doing, taking away habeas corpus. I don't like ICE. I don't like the Supreme Court saying it's fine to just pick up anybody, even if they're a citizen, with no proof and cart them away. This is not the American way. So back to Heather Cox Richardson, she said, don't wait for next year's election. We have to be very vocal now. And I still see a lot of big influencers who are tippy-toeing, not wanting to upset the administration. And I really need to ask them to look in the mirror and look at their children and look at their grandchildren and really have an honest conversation with themselves. Because if you're going to self-censor and you're going to think it's okay to appease a dictator, dictators will take more and more and more, period. And I don't know if you saw the news about Russia sending drones into Poland, but if you think it was an error, I disagree. I don't think it was an error. I think Putin is testing the waters and wanting to know what's the reaction going to be. Because there was reaction when he invaded Crimea and took it over, and there were heavy sanctions and et cetera against him, but not anything more. And now I just listened to a New York Times story about how Putin has now replenished his fighting force by buying off Russian men and giving them more than 10 times their annual salary to become soldiers, and giving them bonuses for people they kill and for actions that they take. So Putin's continuing to pressure Ukraine. And I'm saying what the experts say, the military experts, that if you try to appease Putin, he's going to take more and more and more, and he's going to take over Ukraine if we don't do something more dramatic. So, I think the time is now. I'm very heartened to see so many people protesting in DC. I'm heartened to hear about Chicago, but start talking to your neighbors and ask them, organize. We really need to do more now, and the focus should be on the GOP and the Supreme Court. I'm so disappointed in the Supreme Court. It's so obvious that they were ideologically driven. They lied when they were being evaluated by the Senate for confirmation, and they're doing what they're told to rubber stamp this right-wing theocratic takeover of the United States of America. And those of us who understand authoritarianism and mind control, we say, use your voice. Don't give up your power. Fight. And when I say fight, I don't mean physical fight with violence. I'm talking about stand up and use your voice, use your influence. Because, when you think about how many people in the United States elected Donald Trump compared to the people who voted for Kamala Harris, and all the people who didn't show up or didn't even get registered, we really can mobilize the vast majority of citizens to say no to this. And I keep waiting for people to come forward with a strategic plan that involves the knowledge of psychology, educating people. And my contribution is about using the influence continuum and the bite model, educating people about malignant narcissists, the toolbox, and empowering former members to share their stories and connect the dots with people who are in MAGA. So I started to do a shout out from Marjorie Taylor Greene. I think I went off on a tangent. I want to just say she was full on QAnon, if you remember a few years ago. And I wrote about QAnon as a PSYOP. I have a bite model evaluation of QAnon as a PSYOP. But the whole trafficking thing, she's not letting the Epstein list go. And she put up this placard in the Capitol with Trump's birthday message to Jeffrey Epstein. And she's got to know it's going to piss off Donald Trump. So the question is, does she really believe it? Is she doing what she's told by Russia? What's up? But I'm pleased that she is saying we have to believe the trafficking victims. And with that, I want to comment that Garcia, the head of La Luz del Mundo, a trafficking new apostolic reformation cult based in Mexico and in California, Garcia's been in jail, but he was just charged with federal charges of trafficking. And I'm thrilled. I'm so happy. We interviewed a fourth generation victim of Garcia's family, Xochitl Martin, on our Substack, on our podcast, and we featured her as well in the new Spanish edition of Combating. So if you know people who read Spanish, prefer to read Spanish over English, please get them a copy of Combating in Spanish and begin the education process. Please. We need everybody. Okay, to the need. How about the Maha report about healthier kids? Thank you. Yeah, so we did a report in my Substack about Maha and raw milk, etc. And let me say categorically that RFK doesn't believe in germ theory. What do you think of somebody in 2025 not believing in germ theory? And for anyone who studies the history of science, they know that the realization that people were not washing their hands as children were being birthed and dying at extraordinary lengths, and just washing their hands improve the likelihood of survival for children. I mean, how can anyone who's intelligent not believe in germ theory? And he is right about ultra-processed food and sugar, but this is a cult that caters to big corporations, big conglomerates. And we've heard about big pharma, but have you heard of big food? Do you really think big food is going to allow a change of diet and regulations to take out sugar that addict people? But check out my interview with Robert Lustig, MD, who has gone to great lengths to document just how horrible sugar is and how it's the root of the 5 most common health concerns in Americans, including obesity and diabetes and such. And I believe it was Caroline Kennedy or someone else in the Kennedy family just said, we can't stand by what Robert is saying. It's going to kill millions of people. And I myself have had 5 booster shots or 5 COVID vaccinations. I'm planning to get my next one along with the flu shot. I believe in good science. And yes, some small percentage of people have bad reactions, but overall it saves lives. And without modern science, without modern medicine, I think what we're going to see is massive deaths, unfortunately. So we have Time Lord Mandalorian. Hello, Dr. Hassan. Just want to say sorry to hear about the passing of Robert Lifton. I just got his book on survivors. Hope you're doing well with his passing. Thank you very much. And thank you for mentioning Robert J. Lifton. And for those of you who didn't hear my live stream last Friday, I learned that morning that he had died the previous day, and there was a very long obituary in the New York Times. But I knew he was failing, and I knew he was very elderly. He was 99 years old. I have no doubt he was trying to get to 100, knowing him. But he literally changed my life in 1976 when I met him and told him about the Moonies. And he, as a good listener, said, Steve, you need to study psychology because what you're describing is so much more sophisticated than what the Chinese were doing with Mao in the 50s. It's like a hybrid mutation. You need to study psychology and explain it to people like me. So here I am 49 years later, and several books and TEDx talks, and I have a course for clinicians, for psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, and counselors that's online. And to my knowledge, it's the first online course for CEs, for all of these mental health experts, to teach about how to do therapy with people born or raised in cults, or people like myself who've been recruited into a mind control cult. So anyway, how am I doing? I'm feeling old that he died, and I lost Phil Zimbardo last year. And Dr. Zimbardo spent a lot of time and effort encouraging me and empowering me. So it's sad, but I created a page to memorialize him that has blogs that I've written about Robert Lifton's work and has links to all of my video interviews. So please, I don't know if we have a link ready that we can throw up here, but if you go to freedomofmind.com and put in Robert Lifton, you'll find it easily. Was there another question that you wanted to share, that you wanted me to respond to? Nancy Farms, Trump terrifies me, but I'm more mind blown over what this has revealed about our fellow man. What can I say? But if it hadn't happened to me in the Moonies, I would be like you. Like, I would not understand how intelligent, educated people could follow a deranged psychopath, malignant narcissist. But because it happened to me, I did the deep dive into social psychology and neuroscience and clinical psychology, and we're human beings, we're emotional beings, we're social beings. But the good news is that our brain adapts to our environment. And if you change the environment, you open the doors for people to change their mind. And it's no accident if people are stuck that they're encouraged to get up and take a walk, go exercise, go into nature, have a change of scene. And if you look at my TEDx talk, how can you know if you've been brainwashed? Step one is to disconnect from the sources of influence that you're currently subjected to if you want to know whether you've been brainwashed. Because it's almost impossible to discern if you're brainwashed, if your brain is continually being bathed in cult propaganda. So this brings up Ground News that I've mentioned several times. It's an aggregator of news stories because it will give you different perspectives on the same news story. So it'll allow you to do some reality testing. Let's see, Groovy Cathers 2. Hi, Stephen, big fan from the UK here. Thank you. Is what we're seeing in MAGA movement a form of mass hysteria? So there are lots of labels, and Bandy Lee likes to talk about a contagion, psychotic contagion effect. But what we now know about the brain is we have mirror neurons, and that we adapt to people and information in our environments. And when you hear about crowds where people go nuts and do terrible things they would never in a million years do in their normal life, one can see this group effect happening. It also works in reverse. So as more and more people are realizing Trump is evil, that the GOP is, by swearing fealty to Trump, by the Supreme Court doing whatever Trump tells them, is antithetical to all of our values and human rights needs and rule of law, more and more people are saying this is wrong and I don't like it. And so we want to welcome them. We want a coalition of people that's very big and wide. And we want to get out of this binary all or nothing, good versus evil stuff. And we all need to band together in a coalition against authoritarianism. And Trumpism is just one authoritarian cult amongst Putin, Xi. I don't know if you saw the article about how American big tech has been used by China to surveil people who are unhappy with the government there. But there was a story of a Chinese middle class person who didn't want the government to take their small parcel of land, by force, and was protesting it. And they used big tech to threaten him, harass him, follow him around, threaten his family, etc. That's what's coming here, unfortunately, with Palantir, with Peter Thiel, Palantir, Musk, Zuckerberg, Bezos. And it's not cool. And we need to put a stop, please, in terms of just embracing big tech as a wonderful thing. Because without guardrails, without ethics, without real genuine concern for humans, they're going to get more and more power and control over us, and surveillance capitalism will be ramped up to new levels. Let's see, can't read the first thing because there's a number in the upper left. Uninhabited rug. Dr. Hassan, what's going to happen when tens of millions of Americans realize Trump is a con man, has been using them? I'm guessing they won't be in a very good place mentally. I cried for hours when I realized Moon was a liar. And if he was a liar, then he couldn't be the Messiah. And if he wasn't an agent for God, then he wasn't trustworthy. Once the wheels started turning in my head, I was so low. I was miserable. And I felt like so embarrassed, ashamed, confused. And, I could remember back to my family and friends saying, Steve, it's a cult. Steve, he's a con man. Steve, don't, you're being brainwashed. And I dismissed it out of hand because I didn't feel brainwashed and I thought I was operating for myself. And that's why it's so important, and why I'm making a dramatic appeal to all former members, whether you were born in a cult, Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, New Apostolic Reformation churches, all different types of political cults. If you've escaped totalitarian countries, share your story, learn the bite model and the influence continuum, and be warm and empathetic and help people, welcome them back. The last thing you want to do is say, I told you so, and make them feel more ashamed or guilty. And you want them to understand social psychology. You want them to understand hypnosis. That's why I've been generating so much content, why I have so many videos, why we're developing our Substack and asking people to subscribe to it, so that people can get educated. And I have some courses that are online, and I hope to do more courses, especially aimed at demonstrating what not to do when you're talking to someone in MAGA, and what to do. And to repeat what my regular listeners have heard me say over and over again, is the most effective thing is not to ever attack Trump, the leader, the doctrine, or the policy head on, because it activates the cult identity that was created in his image. What you want to do is talk about other cults, and with MAGA, you want to talk about Chinese communist brainwashing and pimps and traffickers, and explain behavior control, information control, thought and emotional control. And ask them questions. What do they think about this? What do they think about that? Have they watched a documentary, The Vow, for example, about Nexium, or Stolen Youth about Larry Ray cult? Let's see. Focus Lady, are there any new psychological therapeutic interventions or areas of clinical collaboration that don't pathologize parents for coerced, cult-mediated choices outside their control? Let me read this again in my head. Are there any new psychological interventions that don't pathologize clients for coerced cult media? So the key thing is understand. This is the key for me, is understanding the single most important principle of social psychology. It's called the fundamental attribution error. And it talks about the fact that we have unconscious biases in our brains, models that we carry with us. And when we look at other people and why they get involved with cults and such, we tend to overestimate the disposition or the personality. Like Steve was weak, Steve was stupid, Steve came from a bad family, he didn't have a religious education, something wrong with the person. And they underestimate the social influence variables. Steve was sleep deprived, he was isolated from family and friends, he was constantly being surrounded and never alone. So the point is we don't want to pathologize people because they've gotten into a cult. Most people get in because they've been lied to, either withholding vital information.
Yeah, we are experiencing a few typical difficulties. Steve is a little stuck right now, so I'll try to get him right back in. Please just stick with us for a couple more minutes, and I'll get Steve back into the stream. Thank you. This is Jerry, the producer.
So sorry, we had a technical glitch and I'm not sure why. We'll try to figure that out, but thanks for staying with me. And I'm not quite sure how far I got in explaining the fact that we want to do psychoeducation to people who've been taken in by destructive cults like MAGA, who believe in Donald Trump as an agent of God because they were following their apostle or their prophet. These folks need to study other cults and the bite model as it applies to other cults, and then think back to how they got involved, whether they were born in. It's a bit harder for people born into groups to reality test, but Talk to people who were born into other authoritarian religious cults if you were in one of those. My experience is fundamentally people are good. And people don't like to be lied to. They don't like to be exploited. Women don't like to be treated like second-hand citizens, second-level citizens. Nor do children want to be treated poorly or corporally punished. So let's lift people up by being grounded ourselves. Let's see. Again, I can't see the thing because there's a number. Thanks. Ishan White, is it unreasonable to think and want the Republican Party to be dissolved? Do I think it's unreasonable? No, I don't think it's unreasonable. George Conway wrote the foreword to the re-release of the Cult of Trump book that came out last September in 2024. And he said that there is no more Republican Party. It's the cult of Trump. They just do what they're told. Nobody's exercising their conscience, their free will. They're cowered by fear, or they're being blackmailed, or they're being socially pressured that they'll be ostracized or that they won't be reelected. But the public needs to be so much in an uproar to their politicians who are Republicans to do the right thing, that these politicians are more afraid of their constituents' ire than they are of Trump and their colleagues. So what can I say? Massey is talking about, we want the Epstein files released. Let's release the Epstein files. That seems like something in the right direction to pull back the curtain on what those of us who've been studying Trump know is the reality, that has a history of lying and abusing women. Let's see. Julie Simmons on Substack asks, what is Amy Coney Barrett trying to accomplish by speaking to the press? So please go to my Substack and look at what I posted when she had been initially nominated to the Supreme Court. She was raised in a cult called the People for Praise, where women are second class and have to defer to their husbands. And her husband's a lawyer. And I raised the question, what would she vote for if her husband told her to vote a certain way? And these issues. And we know for a fact that the Federalist Society was created to counter the liberal justices. They were not happy with ecology regulations. They were not happy with IRS regulations. Now Trump is trying to get rid of IRS agents and trying to get rid of regulations for the wealthiest people who are trying to avoid paying taxes. What's Amy Coney Barrett doing? Unfortunately, I don't see any independent thought or action on the Supreme Court, except for the three justices who are dissenting and explaining based on the Constitution and rule of law what their opinion is. So we're at a moment in time that's so existential and historical. Let's see. Patricia Wren on Substack says, today I wore my Trump for prison hat to Walgreens and grocery store. 4 people told me they love my hat in Red, Louisiana. That's a great idea. Wearing t-shirts. I still have my Drumpf hat that I purchased from John Oliver, the comedian. In 2015, he did a show before Donald Trump got into the White House saying, let's make Donald Drumpf again, Drumpf. Let's make him Drumpf again because he's an immigrant. That's his family name. You think he was, you think his family was Trump? No. So wear t-shirts, wear hats, and talk to the people who like the hats, and just say, we need to organize locally. Let's do book clubs. I've been contacted by several people who've done a Cult of Trump book club, where people get together, read the book, and discuss it, and go on to share what they've learned with other people. Let's see, Karen Meyer on Substack. The Dems have a chance to make an impact by allowing the government to shut down. They're not spending that money for our nation. They are using it to deploy military into blue cities, build up a Gestapo police force and ICE, host parties at the White House, and weekend golf trips. We have a chance here to let the government default. Thank you, Karen. So does everyone know that the government's going to run out of money in 3 weeks unless money is voted for in Congress? And what Karen is alluding to, I heard Ezra Klein opine. He's a New York Times opinion person who has a podcast. And he was calling for the Democrats not doing what Schumer did the last time, which was get a bunch of Democrats to sign on to the abominable bill. And I don't know, but I'm inclined to agree that the Democrats not just need to vote for a default, they need to uphold what needs to happen for them to vote money for this administration, like really radical changes in policies that can put us back on a path of health, economic health and physical health, and rule of law. And I'm waiting, I'm really looking and hoping for some kind of unifying message where all of the Democrats are united. So let's see. But I'm inclined to agree that giving the cult of Trump more money to harm people doesn't seem like a great thing. Let's see, Susie, still a lot of racists here in America. That's a big part why he got elected. There are a lot of racists in the United States, and I think there are a lot more people in the United States who aren't racists, who need to raise their voice. And I want to tell you about Daryl Davis. And I don't know how many people recognize that name, but Daryl Davis is an African-American man. I guess he's well over 250 pounds, fantastic piano player, and he's gotten over 200 people out of the Ku Klux Klan. And how did he do it? They loved his music. They would hear him playing. They're like, "Hey, you play like Jerry Lee Lewis," and he's like, "Yeah, he copied me. Let's have a beer. Let's talk about our kids. Let's talk about common ground things." And just by being himself and not being fearful or intimidated by sitting with racists, he was able to get them to realize, hey, Daryl's a cool guy and a good friend. And when they leave, they give them their Ku Klux Klan robes. This is a proven technique for de-radicalizing people, being warm, human, engaging, finding common ground, listening. Music is a universal. Find areas where you can agree. Let's see, Ryan Mariano on the topic of Maha. Are you aware of Kip Anderson's films on meat propaganda and corruption in the healthcare industry? Isn't it hard to trust these institutions right now and sort out truth versus lie? I don't know Kip Anderson off the top of my head, but I can definitely talk about big corporations want to keep making money, and they have a long history of lying to the public when they understand that things that they're doing is harming the environment, warming the air, is unhealthy, like smoking cigarettes or sugar. The sugar, big food knows that it's harmful for people, but they want to make profits. And so, if anything, we need a moral reboot. I want to hear more people talking about being moral. Like, don't do to others what you don't want done to yourself. Don't treat someone else like you wouldn't want your mother to be treated, or your sister, or your daughter to be treated. That kind of care and compassion about a fellow human being. We know for a fact that global climate warming is induced by human behavior. We know that plastics that are being produced at record numbers is getting ingested into our food sources, into our bodies, going into our brains. This is not good. But without a strong government and agencies who are dedicated to protecting the public, then these corporations can do whatever they want. And we know that eating, animal beef, the balance is not sustainable. If we go back to the indigenous people who looked at the land as their mother, and who killed buffalo, but used all elements of the buffalo, honored the buffalo before they killed it, and ate the buffalo and used its hide, etc. Like, that kind of ecological sustainability makes a lot of sense to me. And I just think that we really need to revisit our morality system. Susie, is there a religion that is not considered a cult by Dr. Hassan? Yeah, so please look at my influence continuum graphic. I think there are many more religions that are ethical, that don't lie when they recruit, that don't tell people don't listen to your conscience, that encourage people to ask questions, that are accountable financially. If you are asked to donate, they'll tell you what they're spending their money on, show you their books. So I'm talking about all religions are on a continuum, and there are bad examples that are authoritarian mind control cults, and there are healthy examples. I know that there are some very dedicated atheists who think that I don't know what I'm talking about, because they think, me saying that I believe in God, they think that I'm a nutcase. But I have a right to my belief. I don't believe in a bearded white man floating in the clouds as God. And I don't take the Bible, the Torah, literally. I think it's a lot of stories, many of them told in different voices by different people at different times. And there's a lot of wisdom in scripture, but there's a lot of concerning things. And that's why in the Jewish religion, there's rabbinic interpretation and a lot of discussion. And why in the Jewish tradition, arguing and disagreeing is part of what is considered a spiritually valid or kosher thing. Is there Supreme Court justices in Opus Dei? So please come to my Substack and listen to my interview with Gareth Gore, who wrote an excellent book on Opus Dei. He talks at length about the Federalist Society being influenced by Opus Dei and Leonard Leo. And if you're not aware, Leonard Leo worked on this billionaire for many, many years, and the billionaire granted him $1.6 billion to continue his operations. And Opus Dei is directly linked to the Heritage Foundation Project 2025. So back to your question about Supreme Court justices in Opus Dei, I don't know of any that have publicly identified with Opus Dei because it's a very secretive Catholic cult. I did put William Barr in my book, The Cult of Trump, because he was on their board of directors in Washington, D.C. So we're pretty sure that he's Opus Dei related. If you haven't read The Cult of Trump, may I please implore you to take the time and read it or listen to it. And if you don't have the funds to buy the book, go to your library. And they have it on audiobook as well as digital, as well as in paperback. Let's see, Lori Girl 09, how do you respond to loved ones who are secular that think Trump is an idiot and isn't a cult and that Project 2025 won't fully happen and think it's just our trauma talking? So, when I'm asked a question like this, my mind goes to wanting to know more about the history of your interactions with this loved one or loved ones. Because if you're thinking you can have one conversation and talk the person out or talk them into accepting something, it's the wrong approach when it comes to influencing folks to reality tests. Because the most effective thing you can possibly do is ask a good question with curiosity and warmth and be active listening. Listen to their answer, repeat their answer back to say, I want to make sure I understand your point of view. And then ask a follow-up question and a follow-up question. Oh, and thank you, Nancy Wallace, my regular super chat. Appreciate you so much. But the thing is if somebody says, I don't accept that Trump is doing Project 2025, if I was talking to the person, I'd be, that's really interesting. Tell me why you think that. And I'd listen, and then I'd say, I'm curious, what would you accept as evidence that Trump is implementing Project 2025? I would ask them if they've looked at summaries of Project 2025. So it's a process. And again, the goal isn't to talk them out of something or into something. The goal is, if you're open your own mind to changing your opinions and you're having a dialogue that's ongoing, let them share something with you and just agree to talk with them about it. Then you can be reciprocal. They share something with you, you read it, you watch it together, you discuss it, then it's your turn to share something with them. You watch it or you read it together and you discuss it. And you just both agree to pursue what's true. And what I say is, if something is true, it will stand up to scrutiny. And if somebody makes an outrageous claim, they need outrageous proof. And it's not on us to disprove something that's outrageous. If someone says something outrageous, very controversial, the burden is on them to explain it and prove it to us. Let's see, we have Cami says, unpopular liberal opinions on Substack. Says, I grew up around domestic violence. I was abused by both my parents. I'm very sorry for you. I grew up in Brooklyn during the crack epidemic. Horrible. I grew up in Queens, by the way. 1.3 miles from Donald Trump's childhood home, I would add. I didn't think I would live to be 16. I participated in 2 cults in my lifetime. It took decades to recondition my mind. Because of my lived experience, I don't believe that people get brainwashed. How do you explain my life? I don't know. I don't know you. And I don't know which cults you're referring to. When you say it took decades to recondition your mind, not sure what you're describing there. But I can tell you, journey is different than your journey, because I grew up in a house in Flushing, Queens, with two parents who married when they were young as virgins, never had affairs, never gambled, never beat each other, cheated on each other. I just had a very grounded upbringing, neighborhood community around me, two older sisters. So when I got radicalized into the Moonies, my Moonie identity was so different. But what you were describing, because of the trauma, the corporal punishment, the drugs, and abuse by both parents, your formative identity never got a chance to grow and be healthy. So it's a very different journey. And if I was doing therapy with someone with your background, I would be starting with the here and now, asking you to be in your body, with a locus of control, with a future positive orientation. And we would learn about social psychology, and we would work backwards back to your childhood. So that would be my clinical orientation. Let's see. Cami says, Graham Moses on Substack. I saw a leaving MAGA leader interviewed last night and said it takes a year to dissociate from MAGA and the MAGA media machine. Do you think I can be done faster than that? I don't know if you're referring to Rich Logis, who does Leaving MAGA. I interviewed Rich as well as Pam Hemphill. And for me, what helped dramatically was I wanted to prove I wasn't in a cult to my family. So I sat for 5 days with ex-Moonies and learned about brainwashing and mind control, and heard stories about the Moonies cult that they experienced that brought up memories of my own experiences in the Moonies. So for me, even though it took 5 days for me to get to the point where I realized the Moonies were a cult and Moon wasn't the Messiah, I'd say it took me a year to like get my identity back. It took me about a year to kiss a woman without having the indoctrination go off in my head, because I was a lecturer in the group. But that was 76. And with the work that I've done and so many other ex-members who are now mental health professionals, I think you can do it faster. But if you don't take the time to learn about cults and mind control, and in particular, I believe you need to learn the influence continuum, bite model, malignant narcissist model, and meet with people who are healthier than you, people who understand and can articulate what worked for them and what didn't work for them in their recovery. So because it matters for you not to feel alone. When I got out of the Moonies, there were very few people talking out at a leadership level. I'm very grateful to Alan Tate Wood, who had left before me, a couple of years before me, who had spoken out. So at least I knew there was life after cult, because one of the main mind control techniques is indoctrinating irrational fears into the person's mind, that if you leave the group, you're going to kill yourself, you're going to go crazy, or you're going to be a drug addict or a prostitute or some negative thing. In other words, when you're in a mind control cult, you can't imagine leaving and being happy and fulfilled in the future, but you need to. This is part of the hope that I'm trying to encourage everyone to have in this dark time of history. We need hope. We need to know we're not alone, and that we're going to get through this the best way we can. Focus on what's within our control. Don't obsess about things that are outside of our control, and enjoy people in real life. Like, have real friends, not just followers online. Listen to music, listen to poetry, go dancing, walk in the woods, play with your kids, play with animals, Do things that make you feel alive. And with that, I see we've run out of time today. Please come join my Substack. We're generating all kinds of extra material now because we want to incentivize people to support us so that we can generate more and more material and do more trainings and help people to survive this age of the cult of Trump. Thank you, team, for supporting me now, and we'll see you soon. Take care.